of dismay in Western capitals. And then you will see Europe unite when they realize that America is not really going to be the world's policeman, that we're not going to see an American president who's willing to lead a desert storm against a future dictator or aggression. Then Europe will unite. And
what Grant says is absolutely right. There is no question that the scriptures teach that in the last days, the center, the power base of this New World Order is going to be in Europe. But before we go on, I want to say something about that. In our video, Europe, the Revived Roman Empire, that we really just produced a few months ago, we were talking about the fact that the United States, Canada, really the whole Western Europe, it seems, is going to be involved in this revived Roman Empire. So it's not a case of the United States just disappearing off the map and becoming a non-power. It's just that it'll become one of the Western European powers in the days ahead. So the U.S. may be pulling back in its leadership role, but I think it'll really still be at the heart of the thing.
But there was a young man who spent many hours per day on his knees in prayer to his God, Jehovah, Yahweh. And he was the one who later became the prophet Daniel. And he asked God for guidance. And the Lord showed him what the dream was. So he went before King Nebuchadnezzar and said, I have the answer. Why, you must be something out of this world, a genius. No, no. There is a God in heaven that revealeth his secrets unto the children of men. Daniel 2:28. And my Lord showed me your dream. Let me tell you what it was. You saw this great image, and it had a head of gold. Yeah. Oh, go on. It had chest and arms of silver. I can't believe this. It had stomach and thighs of brass. Right on. And it had 2 legs of iron. Overwhelming me. And finally, it had 10 toes of iron and clay. Daniel, that's my dream. But wait, Nebuchadnezzar, God also showed me the interpretation. And it won't bring good news to your heart. Please, take this message as from God. I won't harm you, Daniel. Tell me the interpretation. You, Nebuchadnezzar, are that head of gold, representing the Babylonian Empire. However, the chest and arms of silver will soon overtake you. They are the Medes and the Persians. It happened. Then he said, another great power will arise of brass, picturing the stomach and thighs. And this happened when Alexander the Great of Greece conquered the Medes and the Persians. Then he said there were 2 legs of iron. And this represents the mighty Roman Empire. Why 2 legs? Because at one time there were 2 areas for the headquarters of the Roman Empire, Rome and Constantinople. Now notice that the silver arms and chest conquered the head of gold, and the stomach and thighs of brass conquered the silver, the Medes and the Persians, and the 2 legs of iron conquered the stomach and thighs of brass, Greece, but no one ever conquered the Roman and the Roman Empire. There is no break in the legs. And Gibbon, in his writings, The Fall and Decline of the Roman Empire, says they fell through internal corruption. But their history is not over. Why? The last world government will still be of iron, as the legs typified. Rome revived. That's why books 100 years of age and older tell us that Rome will come back to power, but in a deteriorated form because the iron is mixed with clay.
Well, you know, We used to talk to a lot of people, and they would say the United States plays such a central and leading role in world affairs. How could this united Europe ever rise to become the power on earth with the United States in the way? And as Peter has just pointed out, the United States wants very much to be a part of this new Europe, not to be its own entity anymore, but to become part of the new Europe. And the recent elections in the U.S. show that the United States is, in fact, beginning to look inward. Well,
in Daniel 2, already discussed, we saw that Nebuchadnezzar had the dream that was interpreted by the prophet Daniel. But in Daniel chapter 7, under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar's son, Daniel has a dream. And God shows him the same 4 world empires in chapter 7, verses 4 to 8, under the picture of 4 beasts. The first beast was a lion, the second a bear, the third a leopard, and the fourth a composite beast of all the others having 10 horns. 10. And again, it represented Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, with the final world empire in history being the revived Roman Empire.
Are these interpretations correct? Is Daniel 2 a replay of Daniel 7? Is Daniel 2 showing us a complete history of the Gentile powers on earth? And how do those Gentile powers on earth end up? Is it localized to a revived Roman Empire, as we're being told, or to a global power run from the United Nations? What does the evidence indicate scripturally? The angel of the Lord told Daniel the interpretation of the statue, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. But the last kingdom, we believe here the evidence strongly implies it is the United Nations with their 10 bioregions, because the Gentile powers on earth end up as a global rule. The Club of Rome, a United Nations front organization, divided the world into 10 regions called bioregions. And America and the United Nations are located in region number 1 because America is Babylon the Great and the United Nations is their front. Number 2 is Europe, the EC, very important. And number 5 plays a very important role because it's the Soviet bloc nations, Warsaw Pact, and that is very important prophetically. I'm Stewart Best, and I'll be your host as we travel down the highway of mystery that Daniel laid for us. He's one of the most mysterious of the Old Testament prophets, and we find that same characteristic in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation and the book of Daniel are sort of co-keys to each other. One unlocks the other. So you really have to know both in order to understand the basics of Bible prophecy. When we opened the tape, you heard Dr. Jack Van Impe and the Lalonde brothers give their version of Daniel, not only chapter 2, but their references to a revived Roman Empire, which they claim is the European Common Market. That is a traditional teaching, and we don't wish to just single out the Lalonde brothers or Jack Van Impe because the vast majority of scholars in the United States, prophetic scholars, are teaching that very same thing, that there is to be a revived Roman Empire, and that the European Common Market, now known as the EC, the European Community, is that revived Roman Empire, and that as we approach the last days, it will formulate in the boundaries, most of them think, within the old Roman Empire. We wish to challenge that viewpoint from the basis of Scripture alone. We feel the traditional viewpoint has been brought forth predominantly in this age simply because people have not read very carefully, at least, what Daniel actually does say, which carries forward then into a misinterpretation of Revelation and also of Daniel chapter 2. And so what we wish to do here is lay some groundwork to prove to you that there is an alternative prophetic interpretation that is more likely correct and one that we can see being fulfilled before our very eyes. The European community, as of right now, has an excess of 10 nations. In fact, our inside information says it will go well beyond 23 and possibly much, much higher. A lot of nations want to get into the EC for economic reasons. Therefore, the 10-horned beast of Daniel, the diverse beast that rises up in Daniel chapter 7, they have long maintained would be 10 nations in the EC. Then the teaching was, well, it will go to 13, and then 3 of them will be removed, and we will be back down to 10. However, that's giving a poetic license, if you would, to Daniel and what Daniel actually says. And we wish to get into that aspect of Daniel chapter 7 predominantly, and a little bit of Daniel chapter 2 in this video to show you that that interpretation is most likely not correct. Now, you have to understand also that when Daniel talks about beasts rising up out of the sea, that he's talking about political movements of mankind. The seas are the politics of man. Mankind are the seas, and his politics are what give rise to nations, alliances, treaties, wars, all the things that mankind does upon planet Earth. God views mankind's government as beasts predominantly simply because of man's unregenerate heart. So even though God approves of government, because man is unregenerate, most governments are considered by him to be beast powers because they're evil in their ultimate intent, and they're not designed really to help the people, but more to control the people. So when you're seeing beasts rising up out of the sea, you're seeing political movements within mankind over a span of time, and these beast powers that rise up have certain characteristics. And Daniel applied certain beasts like the lion, the bear, the leopard, as being, they have certain characteristics. And the characteristics of the lion, the characteristics of the leopard, and the bear will be shown to be characteristics within the nations that he's speaking of. Now what we're going to do is challenge the oft-taught concept of that these 4 beast powers in Daniel chapter 7 have to do with historical nations, namely Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. We're going to challenge that on the basis of the scriptures themselves. We're going to show you exactly what the scriptures say, and we're going to prove to you that they could not be Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, or Rome. It's not possible. Now, if they are not historical nations, then who are they? We're going to show you that those nations are modern nations. These are nations that formulate well prior to the tribulation period. They do their thing as God has outlined in the prophecies, and then they enter the tribulation period. And we will show you who and what they are. So what you're going to see in this video is, in reality, tradition versus God's Word. And we're going to demolish the traditional approach and the traditional interpretation of Daniel chapter 7 by God's Word alone. We don't need anything else other than the Bible to prove that the traditional teachings of this most important prophetic chapter are not, in truth, correct. They are, we feel, a deception. It's not that anyone is deliberately trying to deceive anyone. It is that they are interpreting it on the basis of tradition rather than going into the God's Word and finding out for themselves what is actually being said by God through Daniel. The other thing you want to remember is that prophecy is not prediction. Prediction is that in which you gather certain facts, historical or present day, and you attempt to, on the basis of those facts, project ahead as to what will happen. Pollsters do that when you're voting. They will predict a winner well in advance. of when anyone would actually know who was going to win, and they're remarkably accurate. They're doing it on the basis of polls that they take of voters who went in and how they voted. And on that basis, they are able to project winners and losers. This is prediction, because you can always have an upset. God's prophecy is not prediction. It is absolute historical fact written down in advance of its happening. And the reason we say that is because God resides outside of time-space. He's seen it all, and he simply wrote it down and gave it to his prophets. For we are trapped in time-space, and we have to live through what God has already seen. It's all written down. It's all been accomplished as far as God is concerned. Whom he did foreknow, he did predestine. And the word foreknow means it's already finished. He already knows. And those whom he foreknew, he did predestinate through time and space to come into the kingdom. Prophecy is the same way. He already seen it. He knows exactly what the nations are going to do. He's got it all spelled out. He gave it to us so that we would know and not be surprised by the reactions and actions of the nations that we live in. Because of this, then, we here in the United States should be able to get a fairly good grasp of what the United States is going to do and also what her end is. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that the United States is not in Bible prophecy. We're going to prove to you that that's totally incorrect. We're going to get into a little bit of the parameters of who America is. America is positively identified in Daniel chapter 7. And we'll show you how all of this ties together. The other thing you want to remember is that prophecy is also fulfilled in a covert manner. And the reason it is not because God has been secretive about it. It's that the vast majority of people don't read or believe their Bible. So because they don't read it and they don't believe it when they do read it, when the events happen that God foretold would happen, they go by and nobody knows it. Thus does the end come, Jesus said, as a snare upon the whole earth. There is absolutely no excuse for not knowing when the day of the Lord is going to arrive, because Jesus gave us all the signs. He gave it to us through the Old Testament prophets, and he gave it through us through the apostles, and in the book of Revelation sealed it all up. So there is no excuse for not knowing the true identity of the nations, what they are going to do, and how all of this is going to work out and forge the new world order of Antichrist. We thank you for this, taking the time to watch this video, and we hope that it instructs you in many areas. And we know that this is going to be a challenge to much traditional thought, so we ask you not to believe what we say here, but rather that you get into the scriptures and look for yourself to find out if these things be true. Thank you. When you write a letter to a friend, you date it, give them an idea of approximately where you were when you were writing the letter. It's very important for a reference point, a timeline reference point. It's extremely critical when you're dealing in Bible prophecy, such as you are with Daniel. And Daniel gave us the clue as to where he was in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Now Daniel spake and said, I saw in my visions by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. The key is the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Now all we have to do then is determine when Belshazzar came to power by historical records, and we can prove when Daniel actually had that vision and where he was in reference to the Babylonian kingdom. In our book, Babylon is Rising, we dug into this matter at length and found out that Belshazzar was actually a co-regent under his dad, who had gone off to war. And Belshazzar actually ruled for a total of 14 years. He was not a well-liked ruler. In fact, the citizens hated him. Daniel had this vision then 14 years before Babylon was actually conquered by Cyrus the Mede. And this is extremely crucial for us in understanding the vision, because Daniel's vision was at the end of Babylon's long rule over the world. Now, Babylon lived for almost 1,200 years prior to Daniel's vision. Babylon was a major world power and had risen to world splendor under Nebuchadnezzar. But at this point, where Daniel had his vision, Babylon was actually in its decline and was about to fall in 14 years and be overtaken by Cyrus the Mede, or the Medo-Persians. The dating of the vision by Daniel is how you interpret the timeline of the vision. In other words, it gives us a point of reference by which we place Daniel. And at the end of 14 years after this vision, Babylon fell to Medo-Persia and disappeared from the pages of history. Babylon was a major power. In fact, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were one of the 7 wonders of the world. Therefore, the vision came at the end of Babylon's rule and not at the beginning. And this fact is crucial in the interpretation of Daniel's vision. Verse 16, I came near unto one of them that stood by, this is angels, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made me know the interpretation of things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. Now, if you're not totally familiar with Daniel's vision, there were 4 beasts that came up out of the sea, and he is being told by the angels of the Lord that these 4 beasts shall arise out of the earth. Now, that's extremely important. We know where Daniel was, and is just at the edge of the fall of Babylon, and he's being told that these 4 beasts shall arise out of the earth. Now, shall arise, brothers and sisters, is future tense. It hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen in the future at some point. Therefore, the 4 beasts which rise up in the future in relation to Daniel, and they will rise up to power and do what God has outlined for them to do through time-space. Now, if Daniel is standing at the 14th year before Babylon falls, and these all beast powers shall arise in the distant future, which we're going to prove they do, then all 4 beast powers are future kingdoms, and this is so stated in every single translation that we have been able to get our hands upon. It is always stated as being a future tense activity by its implication in the language itself. And this is crucial to understanding the interpretation, the actual interpretation of the vision itself. If they are all going to arise in the future, and Daniel is in Babylon, we immediately have a major problem in modern interpretation, for the first beast they claim is Babylon. Now, the word shall arise means to establish or make, to rise up self, or to stand up, or to set up. And this is crucial because it means, in reality, to give birth and to slowly rise to power. So therefore, the implication of 6966 imparts the thought of the birth and rise to power of the king or kingdoms involved. Now, kings always have kingdoms, so when it says these are 4 kings, it also means 4 kingdoms. The ramifications are severe. Daniel is at the end of Babylon's rule. The first beast to rise up in the future, it will be born and rise to power, all future to where Daniel is at the 14th year, or 14 years rather, prior to the fall of Babylon. So there's Daniel there, sitting almost at the edge of the fall of Babylon. These four beasts are going to arise or shall arise in the future, and that includes the first beast, or the lion beast. Now, if Babylon is falling, then how can the first beast, the lion beast, be Babylon if it is going to arise yet future to Daniel? Therefore, Babylon cannot be the first beast. And this totally destroys the modern interpretation of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. If Daniel is at the end of Babylon's rule, then how can the first beast be Babylon, who is ready to die? In point of fact, it can't be. In point of fact, the scriptures actually deny the interpretation that the lion is Babylon. Babylon is excluded from being the first beast, and you have no options on this. This is what scripture actually says. And if we are Christians, we are to believe the Bible and not tradition. It could not be Babylon, or God is lying to us. The only way one can force Scripture to say that the first beast is Babylon is to transport Daniel back through time for 1,200 years and place him prior to the rise of the Babylonian kingdom. We have no such rights granted by God to do this. We have no license to do it. It violates every known rule of biblical scriptural interpretation. There is no way you can do this and remain true to the prophecies of the Lord. If the first beast is not Babylon, the second beast cannot be Medo-Persia. And there's a very good reason why that is so. Babylon was already in existence, as we know, for a long period of time, and Daniel's sitting at the very end of it. Medo-Persia had actually already been born and was rising to power when Daniel had the vision, and the second beast that was to rise up was the bear beast. And if Medo-Persia is already in power, and Babylon is about to fall to Medo-Persia, and these are all yet future, then the second beast cannot be Medo-Persia, because Medo-Persia was rising rapidly to power when Daniel had his vision. The traditional interpretation is not even possible according to Daniel 7:17. It's not possible, then it is also a crucial misinterpretation of these prophecies, and if you misinterpret this, you misinterpret Revelation and the rest of it. If the first two beast powers have been misidentified, then the last two beasts have been as well. Thus, the lion is not Babylon, the bear is not Medo-Persia, the leopard is not Greece, the diverse beast is not Rome. This standard interpretation is totally in error. They are not historical nations at all, but are latter-day nations that play central roles for the third commonwealth of Israel and the last generation of man upon the earth. And we will prove that to you beyond all doubt if this does not convince you by itself that these are not ancient powers. Now, we have positive proof. And this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, this is always attributed to being Rome, and Rome reviving itself and coming back. It's not possible. It was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. The word before has always been interpreted as being historical, meaning past or prior. But the word before, 6925 in the Strongs, has no such meaning whatsoever. It means to be in the presence of. Now, I want you to think about that. It means to be in the presence of, as we will show you. If you will go out, get your Strongs, and look up the word before, you're in for a shock, because it has absolutely no reference to meaning past history, prior, or ancient. If you will go in and look up Daniel, you will find in every single instance that the word before means to stand in the presence of. For example, in Daniel 5:17, answered and said before the king, meaning he was in the king's presence, and he said this before the king. He was standing in the presence of the king, and he makes this remark. And that is a common reference. We say the same thing. I gave a speech before the General Assembly. I made a speech before the 4-H. The word translated before means to stand before someone or in the presence of. There is no case in Daniel where 69:25 means prior, past, or historical. It always means to be in someone's presence. And this is crucial to this vision and understanding the 4 beasts of Daniel. This means that the 4th beast rises in the presence of the first 3. Please understand that. It also means that these beast powers are contemporaries. They are all ruling together their portion of the earth because all 3 are standing in the presence of the 4th beast. They could not be there unless they were all ruling at the same time. Thus the lion, the bear, the leopard are on earth at the same time, and they watch the 4th beast rise to power. Crucial. Absolutely crucial to understand what is actually happening today, and that biblical prophecy is coming to pass before our eyes. Now the 4th beast is the Antichrist beast power. Antichrist is a latter-day power. It's a tribulation power. Everybody agrees that the 4th beast is the revived Rome or the Antichrist power, but it's not revived Rome. It doesn't have anything to do with Rome. That means that the lion, bear, and leopard are latter-day powers. They are not historical nations of Medo-Persia, Babylon, Greece, and Rome. The word that means prior or past is Rishon in the Strong's 7223, and it's far different than the word in before. It means first in place, time or rank, ancestor, before time, beginning, former thing of old time, past, or in our language, historical. If Daniel meant to say that these 4 beast powers were going to be historical for the people that this vision meant something to, he would have used that word. The 4th beast rises up in the front of the other 3 and takes their right of rule from them. 12, as concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Now the word dominion here is crucial to understanding what is actually happening today and why Daniel's vision is 100% accurate. The word dominion, 7985, means empire or national status. It means the right to rule. Now in our language we call them nations, kingdoms, or states. And that's exactly what the word means, empire. They had their empires or rule, their right to rule or to govern. You see, the root of the word means to dominate, to govern, or to bear rule, to have dominion. Do you see? To have mastery, to have power, to bear rule, or to be a ruler, to make ruler. In other words, the nations are set up with constitutions which give them the right to rule. Now their dominions or their rights to rule are taken away, yet the lives of their nations are prolonged for a season and a time. This is crucial because this is exactly what is happening with the nations and the kingdoms of the earth today, giving their dominion over to the United Nations. Now the word prolong means to lengthen. In other words, the nations exist as nations, and the people within those nations have their national identity, and yet they are being ruled by a higher power other than the nation they live in. So the nations are preserved, they're kept alive, but the right of rule through the constitutions are given over to the 4th beast. The nations and kingdoms still exist, they still have life, but they have transferred their sovereignty over to the fourth beast. And this is crucial to understanding what is actually going on. Now, in the United States, we have a constitution. All nations have constitutions. And these constitutions give them national status, and they give the government the right to rule or the right of dominion. The rights to rule or to exercise dominion are in every constitution, no matter what form it takes. It's the legal framework which gives the leadership the right to rule over its people. And this is crucial to understanding what is actually going on. This means that the fourth beast power rises up and usurps the constitutions of the three beast powers in its presence. Do you understand the ramifications of this? It means that the three beasts did nothing to stop the fourth beast power, but rather implies they aided its rise to power. And in fact, we're going to find out that all three beast powers actually instigated the fourth beast and bring it to power. This proves that the fourth beast is an international organization and that it operates by treaty. The fourth beast must be an international form that operates by treaty, because that is how nations and states sign agreements, through international law. They do it through treaty power. Sovereign nations can only transfer their rights of rule via treaties with other nations. This means that the fourth beast operates as a treaty power and usurps national constitutions via treaty. Thus, although the nations exist, their lives are prolonged, their dominion or rule through their constitutions is given over to the fourth beast via treaty arrangement. Please understand what this means and the ramifications of it in relation to prophecy. In other words, the fourth beast is granted by the governments of the three beasts the right to rule over them. In other words, the constitutions of the nations are usurped. In the United States, that means that the Bill of Rights and the rest of the Constitution will be destroyed, and that by treaty, the rulers of America will give this international forum authority over the citizens of the United States. This means that treason against the Constitution of the United States must be used, for a Constitution clearly forbids any such act. No treaty can supersede the Constitution, and yet that is being interpreted in the direct opposite today. This also means that Americans will be subject to another constitution, the Constitution of the fourth beast power. It will be a world constitution, for the fourth beast is a worldwide power. This fourth beast will claim to represent the peoples of the world. The Charter of the United Nations claims to represent the people of the world. The United Nations is a treaty power organization. It derives all of its power from the treaties it has with the nations of the world. This is how it operates. The United Nations claims to represent the peoples of the world. Read the United Nations Charter. The United Nations desires to come to world power and to police the entire world. It is now demanding a standing world army. Butros Ghali wrote many articles concerning his demands for a world army. The United States is the leader and power behind the rise of the United Nations. We have essentially financed it through the rich men of the earth and their tax situation. The rich men of the earth are the primary instigators for this world government according to Bible prophecy. You'll find that in James. Go to now, ye rich men. The United Nations is the gathering place for the world leaders. This is where they all meet. They all come to New York City, the great city Babylon. They come to the great city, and there they institute their global laws and are slowly spreading their net for a global world government, which will be a socialistic dictatorship under the Antichrist. This is what's happening, brothers and sisters, and it's happening right in front of your eyes, while the prophetic scholars in America are claiming it's the EC and that nothing is happening in America. In fact, America, they will tell you, is not even in Bible prophecy. And nothing could be further from the truth of that remark. The actual opposite is the actual truth of Bible prophecy. Jesus spoke of this gathering together of the nations as a key sign of the end. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. The key word is distress of nations with perplexity. The nations come into a time of distress, a time of chaos. It's planned chaos. It's been planned. Nonetheless, they come into a time of instability with uprisings and revolutions and wars going on everywhere. And they come together to try and forge a world government to bring the citizens of the world under their dominion. And although they speak of peace, they instigate wars to bring about peace. Now the word means to hold together or to compress, to keep in, to press, or to come together in essence. They try to work out their problems. The nations come together, they compress to forge a new world order. It is the final rebellion of man upon earth. The final attempt to create a world government is spoken of by God in Psalm 2. Why do the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder, and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision. This is a latter-day prophecy. This is the gathering of the Antichrist. This gathering of world rulers in rebellion against God is spoken of by Daniel. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, and shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and a dividing of times, or 3.5 years. There are several other proofs we must look at which substantiate totally that the four beasts are latter-day nations. The traditional teaching is that Babylon was devoured by Medo-Persia, then Greece devoured Medo-Persia, and then Rome devoured Greece. But are these interpretations correct? We have already shown you they can't possibly be correct. This being the case, the fourth beast must stand totally alone, for it devoured the other three, and this is denied by the word before as discussed, and more importantly by the fact that Daniel never says anywhere that the beast devoured the lion or the leopard devoured the bear. These are all part of a fanciful tradition that has grown up, when in fact Daniel said that the truth of the vision couldn't even be known until the very last part of the latter days. The omission of such important facts proves that God says what he means and means what he says. The next major point is the fact that the lion, the bear, and the leopard show up in Revelation 13, proving beyond all doubt that these empires are pre-tribulational and tribulational players, because Revelation 13 deals in the Great Tribulation. It must also be noted that the fourth beast is said to be diverse from the other three beasts in its presence. That is, very different in its makeup. It is not a nation, it is not a kingdom. It is different in all aspects. It cannot be a nation, as we just said, as we know them today, but rather it is very different from all governmental structures, diverse and strange to the world itself. And the United Nations is indeed very, very strange. It's a very diverse form of government. It's totally different than anything we have ever seen on the planet Earth. It is not a nation or a kingdom, but rather an organization that derives all of its power via treaties it makes with the kingdoms and the nations of the world. The United Nations is joined by treaty. It usurps the sovereignties of its member nations by making treaties with them, and then it enforces the treaty agreements even if they are contrary to those nations' constitutions. And by this method, the United Nations slowly rises as the ruler of the whole earth, and eventually it gets all the world armies under its control. Rome never accomplished such a feat, nor was Rome diverse from Babylon, Medo-Persia, or Greece, as it adopted many governmental and religious practices from each preceding empires. This fourth beast is diverse from anything ever seen prior in the history of the world. And the United Nations is that beast. There is absolutely no question about it. Now, the United Nations will be modified, and we may be seeing part of that modification in the very near future. The final summary of it all, the American Christian is looking in the wrong place for the rise of Antichrist. The odds are that he does not appear out of Europe, the EC, or any revived Roman Empire. He comes in a way least expected, in a manner least expected, and at a time least expected. His rise to power is covert, and sooner than anyone realizes, so be warned, for Antichrist is among us. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man. And a man's heart was given to it. Daniel 7, 3 and 4. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. Daniel 7, 5. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Daniel 7, 6. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. Daniel 7, 7. Great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. Daniel 7, 17. All right, now we know that Israel is the center of all Bible prophecy. We know that it is the center of the vortex of all the political affairs that mankind has towards the end of the age. Jesus referred to this in the parable of the fig tree. Zechariah refers to it. We'll take a look at those verses and show you. But basically speaking, Israel is the center of all the political affairs of mankind, even if they don't realize it. And what is happening is that God is working his will on the nations of the earth for one purpose: the salvation of his church and the salvation of his people and the nation Israel. And this will is being worked out through the political affairs of mankind, and even though they are persecuting the Christians now, and the Jews now, and Israel now, there's coming a time when the real church, when the real Jews, there are approximately 1/3 of Israel is to be saved throughout this tribulation period that is soon coming up. Zechariah says 2/3 are rebellious and 2/3 are put away. 1/3 comes through the fire, and he calls it the time of Jacob's trouble. So basically speaking, what the world is headed for is a climax, a clash between the nations, a clash between the nations of the world against Jesus Christ, and the ultimate winners, of course, is the church and Israel. And what we'd like to do now is just take a look at some of those Bible verses and show you that indeed and in fact Israel is the center of it all. And this is very important to us because these beast powers of Daniel chapter 7 all play a major role in Israel's latter-day history. Remember, we have proved that these are latter-day nations. There is absolutely no question that these nations are in fact nations that exist during the 20th century, and we'll show you why that is. The center of all Bible prophecy has always been Israel. Israel is God's chosen nation. Zechariah, behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in siege against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people, and all that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. For all the people of the earth be gathered against it, or together against it. Now, that's a pretty strong statement from the Lord that he's going to destroy essentially every nation on earth, because every nation on earth gathers against Jerusalem and against Israel, and he destroys them. Israel is the apple of God's eye, as is Jerusalem, and he is going to set up his kingdom in spite of the nations of the world who don't want that to happen. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. The portion of Jacob, this is in Jeremiah, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. Thou art my battle axe and weapons of war, for with thee will I break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms, and with thee will I break in pieces the horse and his rider, and with thee will I break in pieces the chariot. Now, this all centers on Israel. Jesus said, learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, according to the doctrine of the 6,000 years, man has, from the time of the creation of Adam, 6,000 years to the beginning of the millennial age, or a 7,000 years total time of probation upon earth. If Adam was created around 4002 or so, where most scholars place it, then the end of the 6,000 years is around 1997 to the year 2000, thereabouts, because of calendar errors and other errors built into history. We are not exactly sure, but we do have a common date we can use, which we will get to here shortly. And you will notice that the 6,000 years is divided into 3 increments of 2,000 years each. Approximately 2,000 years to Abraham from Adam, and approximately 2,000 years to Christ. Now, Jesus spoke of a last generation or a final generation in the fig tree parable. And if you turn to Psalm 90, we learn that Israel has a total of 80 years, and we are quite certain that that 80 years is directed to Israel as a nation, and that it started when General Allenby took Jerusalem on December 9th, 1917, because that is the date that Haggai gave us. The 6,000-year doctrine tells us that the last generation must be in the 20th century. The four beast powers must play a central role, then, in the formation and history of the third commonwealth of Israel, because all these three beast powers are tribulational and pre-tribulational players. So we don't really have any options when it comes to that. We will therefore be looking for these beasts in the 20th century, and each one will play a major prophetic role in the latter years during the final generation of man for this age. We are coming up, brothers and sisters, on the close of this age. Now, World War I sets the stage, and it is, we consider here, the beginning of sorrows. And then we have this last generation, which is for 80 years. Now learn the parable of the fig tree. And the fig tree is Israel. There is absolutely no question that the fig tree is Israel, but pay close attention to the way Christ words it. He says, now learn the parable of the fig tree. When her branch is yet tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. That's Mark 13:28. Very crucial wording, because it means that Israel in the Middle East is a central place, and all the nations revolve around Israel and create a vortex, actually, and she is the center of that vortex as all the nations strive and struggle essentially over the Middle East and Jerusalem in particular. The fig tree is Israel. Now in Ezekiel chapter 36, you're going to find wording that is very, very similar. You shall dwell in the land that I gave your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your God. And I will also save you from all your uncleanliness. But ye, verse 8, O mountains of Israel, ye shall shoot forth your branches, and yield your fruit to my people of Israel, for they are at hand to come. It's interesting that they are at hand to come when the fig tree parable actually starts. And I will multiply men upon you, all the house of Israel, even all of it, and the cities shall be inhabited, and the waste shall be builded. And I will multiply upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bring fruit. Yea, I will cause men to walk upon you, even my people Israel, and they shall possess thee, and thou shalt be their inheritance, and thou shalt no more henceforth bereave them of men. Now, if you go into Ezekiel, it says in verse 12, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, and dwell in the midst of the land. Now, that's a double reference prophecy, and it concerns Israel, which has been gathered out of the nations, but it also concerns Babylon the Great. Now, if you put it all together, it clearly states that the fig tree parable starts before God's people are at hand to come. In other words, they're ready to come, but they haven't gotten there yet. So God says his people are at hand, but they haven't gotten there yet. What nation with the national symbol of the lion played the key role in the establishment of the nation Israel today? None other than England. And England has, lo and behold, the national symbol of a lion standing on its feet. The lion, long a symbol of royalty and power, and also the symbol of Jesus Christ on his return, fits England like a glove. A nation with royalty, steeped in the tradition of pomp and circumstance, a regal nation, and one whose motto says, God and my birthright. British Israel theology teaches that England now has the throne of David, and therefore claims the throne of Jesus Christ. These things are not circumstance. The symbols of the nations are actually chosen by God through his activities upon the minds of men. Thus England has the characteristics of the lion and once ruled the 7 seas, and the sun never set upon the British Empire. She is also the first of the latter-day nations to play a major role in Israel's birth and formation. England has always been noted for her royalty, for her pomp, her circumstance, and the regalness in which she conducts her affairs. And she plays the most central role of Bible prophecy, not only for what she did to institute the foundation for the nation Israel when Allenby took Jerusalem, but more, that she also gave birth to the globalist movement of a one-world order. And that's a very important and central thing when we're dealing in Bible prophecy, because these nations all play key and prophetic roles in relationship to Israel. And England certainly is a central player in all latter-day events. The first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. The national symbol of England is the lion standing on its back feet along with the unicorn. That's their national symbol. Actually, the lion standing upon his feet with the wings of an eagle has been the symbol of England for a number of years. You don't find it on all the crests, but you do find it on some. But in all the official crests, you always find the lion standing on its feet. They played a key central role in the formation of Israel. In a letter to Lord Rothschild, it says, Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917, Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of Her Majesty's government, or His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations which have been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by the Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Signed, Lord Balfour. This is known as the Balfour Declaration, which gave the Jews the right to go back to the land of Palestine. Now, the family tree of England, known as Tarshish in the Scriptures, and her cubs, is interesting. England is the mother lion, gave birth to America, who is one of the primary daughters, called Babylon the Great, also gave birth to Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, are the primary cubs of England. Now this is extremely important because Babylon the Great and England are always portrayed in Scripture as being the same entity. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, Art thou come to take a spoil? You'll find this in Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, the reference to the merchants of Tarshish. You'll also find a reference to it in Psalm 12, verse 12, or rather Psalm 17, verse 12, like as a lion that is greedy of his prey, and as it were a young lion lurking in secret places. And in Haggai, consider now, from this day and upward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid, consider it. Is the seed yet in the barn? Yea, is yet the vine and the fig tree? Do you see what's happening? It says to lay the foundation of the Lord's temple, but it does not say a foundation stone. What event in the 20th century lays the foundation of Israel, which leads to the temple? The British capture of Jerusalem on December 9th, on that exact date that Haggai gave. The 20th and 4th day of the 9th month fell on December 9th, 1917. In that year, General Allenby rode into Jerusalem and took Jerusalem for England, and that lays the foundation for the entire history of Israel as we know it today. Without that event, Israel still would not be in the Middle East. It would still be under the control of the Turks or the Arabs. Then the Balfour Declaration is issued, and that allows, you see, the Jews to come back to their homeland, and the Zionist Congress ratifies the Balfour Declaration, which lays the foundation for the ingathering, and the Jewish persecution begins to occur, not only through other nations, but the Arabs are very resentful of the fact that the Jews are being allowed to return. Their land is now being taken and divided and petitioned. And in this period of time, from 1920 to about 1948, is known as the British Mandate period. On May 14th, 1948, Israel becomes an actual nation, hereby proclaim the establishment of the Jewish state in Palestine to be called Israel. We hereby declare that as from the termination of the mandate, this night of the 14th to 15th May 1948, that was a key prophetic event. But there is something far more important than Israel in relation to the world government. And this fellow's name is Cecil Rhodes, and he was an English capitalist or a merchant of Tarshish. And he is the one who was an agent for the Rothschild banking cartel, one of the international bankers, the rich men of the earth, who founded an organization dedicated to the formation of a dictatorial socialist one world government. He set up a foundation and provided funds for what is known as Rhodes Scholarship to indoctrinate the young men who would become the leaders in the New World Order. President Bill Clinton is a Rhodes Scholar. It is a propaganda college to indoctrinate people into the New World Order that Cecil Rhodes set out to establish. It is out of England, then, which comes the globalist movement run by the rich men of the earth. In England, they are called the merchants of Tarshish. In America, they are called the merchants of Babylon. It is they that set up all of the foundations and front organizations that now control the nations of the earth. The government of Satan is set up in the spirit world. He is, Satan himself could be called the chief executive officer. He's at the top. The demons are the military arm. And these powers control and influence the minds of men upon earth. And the spirit of mammon is used to control and set up the governmental structures upon earth. This is how Satan has set this whole thing up, which is why Christ said you can't serve mammon and God. You have to extricate yourself from the world if you're going to serve Christ. The physical world, then, is set up differently. It has a council of 3, a council of 13, which is also known as the wise men. They have what is known as the Committee of 300, which is essentially the elite, the merchants of Babylon and the banking establishment. They form the foundations and research groups, which are the steering committees. They have a front called the United Nations. The nations fall under the UN, and the states fall under the nations, and the citizens are the slaves under this system, and they have now power over the earth. This is how they set the whole thing up. It's actually very simple if you just diagram it out and look at it. A book written by John Coleman called The Conspirators' Hierarchy, the Committee of 300. This is his 3rd edition now he's printed. It's a very interesting book, and we got permission from him to excerpt some charts. You can actually get this book from the Joseph Publishing Company in Carson City. But what we're showing it to you for is it is very essential that you understand how Britain takes a major role in the New World Order, in the globalists. The executive arm of the Royal Institute of International Affairs is Great Britain, and they are the head of it. Then you have the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers. In the center, you have the Council on Foreign Relations, which controls the United States government and the media within America. Under the United States government, we have education, environment, abortion, gun control, the paramilitary systems set up by the internationalization of the police. And the whole thing is controlled. The Royal Institute for International Affairs, M16, is an intelligence group, much like our CIA. They also control your secret societies, your foundations, much of your Christian publishing, which promotes one world government. And you're seeing this rise to the acceptance of the one world government within the church quite a lot. It's becoming more and more prevalent, and it will become absolutely overwhelming as we move into the final years of this tribulation period, as we approach and move into the final days of mankind's probation upon earth. The Royal Institute of International Affairs is a very powerful group, and they have controlled the Great Britain. Although they may have lost the revolution, the breakaway, the British revolt over here, they got it right back through economics. It's interesting that the lion is also found in Revelation. It's also interesting the symbols that have been developed between England and the United States. The Great Seal of the United States says, announcing the birth of a new secular order. Anything secular is of the world, so you can just as well say announcing the birth of a new world order. That is on the back of your dollar bill. All you have to do is pull one out of your wallet and take a good look at it, and you will find it there. This symbol is not an accident. English Freemasonry, long ago penetrated and controlled by the Illuminati, elected to use America as the primary instrument to set up their new world order. Hence, America, located in the New World, is the leader in the implementation of the New World Order, and became the home of the United Nations, exactly as Christ mentioned would happen when he said, as it was, so would it be again. The reestablishment of Babylon, the nation, Babylon the city, and the great tower. The lion has eagle's wings. The national symbol of the United States is the eagle with outstretched wings. And you will notice that the lion has the eagle's wings attached, and they are shown as one entity because they are also identified by Jeremiah as a mother and daughter, and they never break close association with each other. Even though we went through the revolution against England, nonetheless, England still controls, to a very big degree, the national affairs of the United States. And as we said, our symbol is the eagle with outstretched wings, with our sign, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. And lo and behold, the United Nations sits in America. It's all comes together in the United States, just exactly as by prophecy said it would. And there are very close ties to the Zionist movements. And it is our belief here that British Israel theology and the Zionist movement have gotten together to lay down the foundations to bring about a new world order, and then when it's established and the apparatus is in place, they'll fight it out to determine who is actually going to rise to power. We know who rises to power as Lucifer, who is called the King of Babylon. And in The Secret Destiny of the United States, a very interesting book, it says, in America shall be erected a shrine to universal truth. As here arises the global democratic commonwealth, the United Nations is not on American soil by accident. It was designed to be here. It was built on land given by Rockefeller, and the land upon which the United Nations sits was a slaughterhouse. And God always does things like that because the United Nations is going to be the chief instrument for the slaughter of the Christian people. In the secret empire of the Brotherhood of the Quest, consecrated to fulfilling the destiny for which we in America were brought into being. What are they saying? America was brought into being to bring the United Nations up and to go under the UN and then go forth and take the world. In the larger picture of the world's future, that Nostradamus indicates the coming of a great league or assembly of world powers. This league is the only hope for human peace. Do you see what they're saying? Now, the occult has long known that America was going to introduce the world to Lucifer. The Christians don't seem to know that. They're looking at Europe. But it's all happening right here, exactly as the Great Seal says. America's name in Scripture is Babylon the Great, even though that's denied by many, the greatest nation to ever grace planet Earth. There are over 140 parameters in the Scripture that identify the nation Babylon the Great. America is the only nation that fulfills these parameters. There is no other nation on the face of planet Earth that even remotely fulfills it. Her mother, the lion, will be in existence during the entire time of Babylon America's life. England will watch America burn with nuclear fire in a surprise nuclear attack, and that attack is launched by a confederation of Muslim nations that lie to her north, over the North Pole, and on the other side of the earth. You'll find those references in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Revelation 18. The taking of Babylon America is a total surprise to the entire world and a total surprise to the people of America because they don't know who they are prophetically. Babylon America begins her latter-day life as a godly nation, but turns upon her heritage in the last years of her existence. She then becomes the leading Antichrist power in the world. It's coming to pass. Her great seal is the seal of the little horn of Daniel, the seal of Antichrist. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were three of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. The key word we want to look at is the word horn. It has tremendous meaning. and it means a peak of a mountain or a ray of light. And the root is to shoot out horns of light or rays of light, to shine. These are the actual meanings of the word horn. First one we're going to look at, peak of a mountain. What is the peak of a mountain? If you just chop off the top of a mountain, you get a pyramid. The second meaning is a ray of light, or to shoot out rays. So we have a pyramid, and now we're going to add in our rays of light that come from behind it, that shoots out these rays. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. In the original language, it is actually singular. And this horn, or pyramid, was the eye like the eyes of man, is the actual literal translation. We would also use it in the plural, and it would mean the same thing. So then we add our eye inside the pyramid, and what do we have? We have the symbol of the United States of America. Now Daniel also said, and this is very interesting, that within this horn was a mouth speaking great things. Well, if you take the eye and you simply trace around it, you find that you have lips, and you also find, if you trace around the eye itself, the way it's designed, and reverse it, a mouth speaking great things. Is this all coincidental? Well, possibly it is, but it's not very likely, because God does not deal in coincidences. All right, now John the Revelator also tells us something. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding count the number of the beast. 666. Now what we want to do is look at the Roman numerals below, MDC, CLX, XVI. There are 9 letters there. You divide them up into threes, MDC, CLX, and XVI. Now the occult uses numbers in pyramid form as part of their mystical rites. You'll notice in the Masonic jewel, 33rd degree Mason jewel, there are 3 pyramids. Therefore, there are 3 corners, and the way they do it is God is the highest value, the Mother is the second highest value, and the Son is the third highest value. So what you do is you take MDC, M goes on top, D and C goes on the bottom. Now this is derived from the Roman numerals DCLXVI. If you group them in pairs of 2 in descending order, 600, 3score, and 6. MDC, 1000 on top. CLX, 50 and 10 on the bottom, adds up to 60. XVI on the bottom or the base. V is 5, I is 1. What do you have when you put them together? 600 on the base, 60 or 3score on the second one, and 6 on the last one, XVI. All spelled out, all clearly made visible, and John gave us the exact order in which the code would be broken.
A woman in robes bearing the light of reason had stood for liberty since classical times. It was rumored all over France that the statue was modeled after the face of Bartholdi's mother and the body of his mistress. And there was still another influence, the Freemasons, a secret international brotherhood linked to the ancient builders of the pyramids and the cathedrals. Freemasons were devoted to peace, to liberty, and enlightenment. George Washington was a Freemason. So were Jefferson and Franklin and countless others who made America. Freemasons designed the dollar bill. Freemasons planned the Washington Monument, an obelisk symbolizing the ray shining from God to enlighten mankind. And Masonic symbols were to be present in the Statue of Liberty as well. A torch, the light of human intellect. A book, the laws of the Supreme Architect, indelibly inscribed with the date of America's independence.
The Statue of Liberty has a tablet in her hand and it has MDC, CLX, XVI written on it. And those are, of course, the same Roman numerals as found on the Great Seal of the United States. The woman of Revelation 17 has the name Mystery written on her forehead. Mystery, if you look it up, means secret religious societies or religious rites done in secret. The Masons hold the number 666 and are a secret religious society. The nation and the great city Babylon are portrayed in Scripture as a woman. It's also important to realize that the Statue of Liberty stands in the harbor of New York City, the great city Babylon, even though that is denied categorically by the vast majority of Christians in America. They're always looking at Rome. It's not Rome. It's right here. She wears a crown with 7 rays of light and stands upon a star with a broken chain on her foot in fulfillment of Psalm 2. Conclusion, the lion is England. The eagle's wings represent America. Who is the bear? And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they thus said unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. The bear is easy to identify. For the next major nation to arise after England and America is Russia. Russia began to formulate with the Russian Revolution, although Russia had been around long before that. But for today's powers, it's very important that the Russian Revolution took place when it did. Russia is also known throughout the world as the Russian bear. It rises up on one side, Daniel says, and it has 3 speaking ribs that order it to devour much flesh. Remember, it's the ribs that tell the bear what to do. The rising up of this empire on one side signifies that it will control the Eastern empires, which are, we know today, to be the Warsaw Pact nations. They comprise the enemy of the NATO nations. The 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear represent the 3 founders of the Communist Revolution, Marx, Engels, and Lenin. And if you will read the Communist Manifesto and the other writings, they were agents of the Illuminati, and they installed the Illuminati government in Russia in 1917 during the Russian Revolution. And they directed that Russia rise up and take the entire world for their Masonic Illuminist masters, and they did this by ordering it to devour much flesh. And thus far, the Communist Revolution has murdered approximately 160 million people. They have, in fact, devoured much flesh, fulfilling Daniel to the exact letter.
If the United States and our allies are to maintain the defense required to safeguard our peace and freedoms, we must have a clear understanding of the threat posed by the military capabilities and doctrine of the Soviet Union. As reported in Soviet Military Power in 1988, neither glasnost nor the stirrings of economic reform within the Soviet Union has resulted in any redirection of resources away from the armed forces of the USSR. Soviet strategic nuclear forces, land, sea, and air, continue to be upgraded. Soviet strategic defenses, including the ballistic missile defense system around Moscow, continue to be upgraded. The across-the-board modernization of Soviet conventional forces, tanks, artillery, fighter aircraft, surface warships, and submarines, marks an unprecedented increase in Soviet military capabilities. The most recent evidence of the continuing buildup of Soviet nuclear and conventional force capabilities is documented in this video, which accompanies the Soviet Military Power 1988 publication.
The first half of the 1980s saw a rapid change in the Soviet leadership. The old guard was replaced by a generation that has more experience with the West and a greater flair for public diplomacy. Despite this new look, and efforts to portray a commitment to peace, Moscow continues its arms buildup with weapons systems like this Typhoon strategic ballistic missile submarine. Each missile can carry up to 9 nuclear warheads, all capable of reaching the U.S. from its home waters. By 1987, 5 Typhoons were at sea, and 2 or 3 more are expected by the early 1990s. The Typhoon is not an isolated example. It is representative of an across-the-board modernization of strategic and theater nuclear forces, as well as conventional ground, air, and naval forces. The result is weapons systems that are more accurate, lethal, and survivable. During 1987, the Soviets began to deploy the SS-24 Mod 1 ICBM. This rail-mobile missile carries 10 nuclear warheads and is replacing missiles that carried fewer. They launched the SLX-17 Energia, a heavy-lift space launch vehicle. This shows their ability to place heavy loads, such as space-based weapons, into orbit. They deployed a modified Yankee-class submarine fitted to launch the SSN-21, a long-range sea-launch cruise missile. This increases the nuclear threat to Eurasia and North America. The Soviets deployed a 4th Kiev-class aircraft carrier and the 3rd Akula-class submarine, further improving their naval strength. Their mainstay AWACS aircraft became operational, as did their new Midas tanker. The two give greater range and guidance to Soviet aircraft. Also, the AN-124 Condor heavy-lift transport aircraft became operational. It is able to carry large, heavy cargo, such as tanks and missile systems.
Practically, the Soviet Union is doing all that the United States is doing. And I guess we are engaged in research, basic research, which relate to these aspects which are covered by SDI in the United States.
This comment is a dramatic departure for the Soviets. It's the first admission by a Soviet leader that they are doing high-technology research on strategic defense systems much like the SDI program in the U.S. The Soviet program has been underway for more than 20 years. The USSR's laser program, for example, dwarfs U.S. efforts, with over 10,000 scientists and engineers and more than half a dozen major facilities devoted to laser research. Unlike the U.S., the Soviets already have ground-based lasers that can damage satellites, and they could develop systems to use against ballistic missiles by the year 2000. They are also experimenting with exotic technologies like advanced kinetic energy, particle beam, and radio frequency as defenses against incoming ballistic missiles.
Conclusions. The bear is Russia. Russia was the first Illuminist government ever to grace planet Earth, and the Illuminati is responsible for the Antichrist powers coming in. Then the next beast is a leopard. Daniel said, "After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. And the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it." Daniel 7:6. The next major power to rise up after Soviet Russia was Nazi Germany. And Nazi Germany took on many of the characteristics of the leopard, particularly in its warfare. Nazi Germany played a major role also in the persecution and the murder of the Jews, which actually set up a worldwide sympathy for the Jews to be given a homeland and to allow them to establish the nation Israel. She was also a trial run for the New Age global government. Hitler and his top officials were deep into the occult and into the secret societies. Notice that the leopard has 4 heads and 4 wings of a fowl. These are code words for us to help us identify who these entities are. These heads and wings represent the 4 occultic leaders of Nazi Germany: Hitler, Himmler, Hess, and Goebbels were the key occultic figures in Nazi Germany. 4 heads and 4 wings. What do the wings represent? Well, fowl or birds in the scripture is used to represent the occult forces, those religious and political movements energized by the father of lies, Satan, in many, many cases. The occult history of Nazi Germany is well documented. The video series, The Occult History of the Third Reich, which we will shortly show you an excerpt from, vividly documents this fact. Nazi Germany played a key central role in Israel and came along just at the right time with the formulation of the UN and the call for a new world order.
Nazi Germany, 1936. A state which will sterilize, enslave, and systematically murder millions of men, women, and children. Entire peoples are to be swept from the face of the planet. Whole populations are to be scientifically reduced, those who remain preserved only for their value as slaves. The world is to be subject to a new order. Is a Russian adventuress and self-proclaimed telepath, Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. In 1888, Madame Blavatsky publishes a book, The Secret Doctrine, in which she claims that deep in an underground Himalayan monastery, she has been shown an ancient occult text. In it were revealed the mystical secrets of the universe and the future course of human history. In The Secret Doctrine, Madame Blavatsky describes the universe as having fallen from pure spirit into base matter, darkness, and chaos. But soon it will rise once more to reach the pinnacle of spirituality. Madame Blavatsky claims that this knowledge and more she has learned through initiation into the mysteries of 7 esoteric symbols. Of these 7 symbols, one she believed to be more potent than any other. The symbol is the swastika. In Tibetan mythology, the swastika is the sign of Agni, the god of the sun, of fire, and of creation. And always, whether clockwise or anti-clockwise, whether curved or straight-armed, it is the symbol of good fortune. For Madame Blavatsky, each cycle of creation has associated with it 7 stages of human evolution. Stages she calls root races. The race which will begin once more, the ascent from darkness to the light of the spirit, she names Aryan. In the occult teachings of Madame Blavatsky, the sign of the Aryan is the swastika. The Nuremberg Rally of 1934 has as its theme a mystical concept: the triumph of the will. Homage is paid to a fundamental dogma in the Nazi creed of the swastika. Pure will, the expression of the soul of the race, will overcome the forces of darkness and of chaos. In the world of National Socialism, the race of light, of order, and of the spirit is the Aryan race. Decades before the swastika was adopted by the Nazi Party, a periodical published in Germany by an American occult society became the first German publication to carry a swastika on its cover. The society's founder was Madame Helena Blavatsky.
The Panzer divisions of Hitler's army, with their Panther tanks, filled the description of the leopard very easily. The word panther means leopard, actually. Hitler was financed by the international bankers as they did the Russian Revolution before him. Now the next beast that Daniel saw, he says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Daniel 7:7. Now this is very interesting that we have England, America, Russia, and Germany rising up in the presence of the other three, because this has implications in modern day politics. Thus it will rise in the presence of England, America, Russia, and Germany, and by extension, of course, the EC. And in fact, the implication of the language is that these nations support its foundation and supply it with the funds and militaries to make it work. The fourth beast is the United Nations, as previously discussed. There is no other entity on the planet that fulfills the parameters. The fourth beast absorbs the nations by treaty power and slowly rises to power. Daniel says it breaks the world into pieces, and it has 10 kings. Now remember that the Club of Rome, which is nothing more than a UN operative, has divided the world already into the 10 bioregions, and they are fairly operative today, which is why, of course, you have NAFTA and GATT, because these are economic regions. And that's just what they're doing. They're dividing the world up into bioeconomic regions. The UN displays the phoenix bird, and out of the ashes, they say in their own literature, they would rise from the ruins of World War II and bring in a brand new world order. Remember that the four beasts, the lion with the eagle's wings then, are England and America, the bear, Soviet Russia, the leopard, Germany, and by extension, the EC, the diverse beast, is the United Nations. Remember that the beast of Revelation has the body of a leopard, and so it is going to be Nazi Germany which comes to the forefront in America. We're going to transfer what happened in Germany is happening right now in America. We're following the same footprints exactly. The parallels are indeed ominous. These four beasts are now fulfilling their roles exactly as Daniel said. For more information, call CIA Research, 1-800-257-2672. Thank you for watching.